Hey everyone, it's Brandon here at Unlimited Joy Studios with another Kill Team video. Today, I'm going to share with you my initial thoughts on Kill Team. At a later date, I'll share a more in-depth review once I've had more time to familiarize myself with the game. And my goal for today is to answer any questions you have on Kill Team, or if you're new to the game, give you a little insight to it. And if I don't answer your question, please leave a comment below. If you didn't see it already, I do have an unboxing video for the core starter box here, and so I'll put a link below so you can watch that if you're interested. So my initial thoughts on Kill Team are that Games Workshop did a great job of making a small skirmish squad-based game here with shorter time lengths than the standard 40k game. I personally really like the new flow of the game. I feel more engaged with it. And the basic flow of the game is you get this cool scouting phase before you start the game. So you then get to choose to maybe plant some traps, or maybe you get an extra movement before the game starts to move your guys to like 20% of your guys to a certain can take their normal move, and or maybe you're the other player watching for the person trying to do that move, and you're going to shoot their units. So it's got some cool, right at the beginning there, that scouting phase, and then your standard turns or battle rounds go through an initiative phase where you determine who has priority or who goes first in each phase. Then you go into a movement phase where each player takes their turn moving all of their units before the next player, and then once all the players have done that, so player 1 moves all their units, then player 2 moves all their units. Then you go into the shooting phase, you go into the psychic phase if you have any psychers, and you can cast one ability with a psyker per player in that phase. Then you go into the shooting phase, and you take turns. You start with units that readied in the movement phase. If they didn't move, they could ready, and then they get to shoot first. And so you take turns alternating one unit at a time. So it's different than the movement phase. You don't get to do all your units shooting in the shooting phase. You now pick one unit at a time to shoot. And so I'll pick my one guy, so player 1 picks one person, then player 2 picks one person, player 3, and so on. You can, I guess I didn't mention, you can have 2 to 4 players in Kill Team now. They have scenarios up to 4 players. Pretty awesome. So then after your shooting phase, you go into your close combat phase. So if you charged in the movement phase, you now get priority to your units that charged get to fight first, and then once all charging units have fought, anyone who was in combat from the last turn would then start going, and you alternate around. So that's pretty cool because you're really going back and forth between players pretty often, so you're not waiting as long for your turn. And then after the combat phase, you go into the morale phase, which is where is your kill team, did their morale break? Did they lose too many guys and their morale broke? And if you have flesh wounds now, which I'll explain in a minute here, you have to take nerve tests to see, is your unit, due to his wounds, is he too afraid that now he's shaken? And if your unit's shaken, they're basically useless for the next turn because you can't move them, you can't shoot, you can't basically do any action with them. They have to sit there where they're at. So they're kind of like just, in my case, I had 2 units get shaken in one of my games, and they're just sitting there, and I couldn't do anything. They were just taking hits from the enemy until they died, basically. So flesh wounds are kind of this cool new mechanic they have that's, I'm not quite sure on it yet, because sometimes it works in your favor, other times it doesn't. So what happens for a flesh wound in the game is if your unit was going to die, one of your characters in Kill Team, you now get to roll a die, and if you roll a 3 or lower, I should take a step back. If you have 0 flesh wounds, so your unit may die now, you roll a die, and the first time you do this, they have no flesh wounds, you have to roll a 3 or lower to survive. If you roll a 4 through 6, they die, and you remove them from the board. I guess the rulebook says they don't necessarily die, but they get knocked out, or they're removed from the fight, basically. After you have 1 flesh wound, you now have to roll a 2 or less. And then after you have 2 flesh wounds, you need to roll a 1 to survive. So it gets harder the more wounds you get. And then once you've got 3 flesh wounds, if you make it that far with that unit, then they automatically die because you can't roll lower than a 1, right? So that's that's the kind of new tactic they give you. So in standard 40k, once you run out of wounds, your units die. But in Kill Team, you have this like kind of second chance. You get 50% chance, then a 33, then a 16. So it's good in times where you need your one guy to survive, and you make that roll. But you do get penalties for every flesh wound you get. So you get a -1 to hit for every flesh wound you have, which is pretty interesting because I mean your characters are getting, their aim's getting worse, which is very realistic. But it makes for pretty interesting, because I know in one of my games the Tau player had like everyone in his kill team. He had like 8 guys left, and 7 of them had flesh wounds. And you're automatically broken. Your morale is broken if you have everybody has a flesh wound. But he didn't have one guy. He had one guy who didn't have it, which was pretty funny because he kept going turn after turn with all these guys with terrible penalties on their shooting and hitting. But they weren't dying. They just kept getting more flesh wounds. So it was kind of an interesting thing where like you haven't really killed his units yet. They're still hanging on by a thread there. And I guess it fits into the kind of grim universe that is Warhammer 40k, where your guys are giving it their all. So I really like that. I think it's a cool tactic there. It's pretty unique. Yeah, so that's flesh wounds. So in a nutshell, though, I really like Kill Team. I like the turn flow. As I said, you get that back and forth with players. The flesh wounds giving you some interesting perspectives. The customization of the teams I haven't gotten into much. I plan on posting a video about making a Kill Team shortly, once I've finished up mine here. And the depth, though, that you can do with that and giving characterizing your Kill Team and getting that backstory with them, if you're into kind of the more RPG element, I think is really great in Kill Team, and I'm very excited for that. And like I said, very excited for the campaign play. And overall, I think it's going to be a pretty awesome game. So I'll share some more videos coming soon as I'm getting through them. I got a lot of assembly to do. You probably do too. So again, if you have any questions that I didn't answer or something was unclear, please leave a comment below. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing or hitting the thumbs up, and I'll see you next time.